It is a stormy, ominous day here at MVM Studios, but we've got a preview / just played for you for this game, Kronologic.
Yes.
This is a new one that's headed to Gen Con. We've had a chance to play it. It's a deduction game.
We love deduction games.
Some of us more than others. I love a good deduction game too, but when you're sitting next to Emily, you don't like deduction games as much as anyone else at the table. I can tell you that for sure. But this is a deduction game, and it's actually the first in what looks to be a series of deduction games. And playing it is actually maybe as straightforward, if not more so, than many other deduction games I've played in terms of what you're doing. But it's just as thinky, if not more so, and it
has
really
lots
ramps.
of different levels.
The levels are kind of crazy.
So, like, first of all, there are 3 different scenarios that you can play with. The first scenario that has you starting out with, you're just going to the opera, someone's been poisoned. The detective has been poisoned at some point throughout the night. And what's different about this is there are locations and rooms, there are 6 characters, and there are also 6 different times throughout the night. So what you're trying to deduce is who was in which room at which time. And for this first scenario, you're saying, okay, the detective was poisoned at some point in the night. You have to figure out at one point in the night the detective was alone with one other person.
And in what room.
And at what time.
Yeah, so the game is built such that there's only one of the 6 times where the detective is in a room with only one other person and not by himself.
Yes.
And that is going to be your answer. Now, that's pretty straightforward, and it is the most straightforward that this game gets because, and we're just going to do this, get the third scenario. She read this to me the other day, and my head started melting.
The third scenario is about the singer's jewels. So the singer has some famous jewels that are here in the opera, and what you know is that it gets, people come in disguised as burglars or disguised as regular guests, they are burglars, and try to take it out. At time 1, the necklace was seen in the dance hall, and then it was stolen by the first character who found it alone in the room. Then that person departs with the jewelry. Later, each time that the holder of the jewelry is with one other person, they change hands with the jewelry. However, if that character is alone, or with 3 or more characters in the same room, they keep the necklace. You have to figure out who has the necklace at time 6, and where should the police go to intervene.
Got it? Simple, right? That is crazy because, and I'm not sure I understand it. It sounds like, are there multiple bad guys in that one?
Yeah, they're all kind of like working together.
It's like a heist?
Yeah.
And they're handing the necklace off?
As long as they're just 2 people in a room, they'll hand it off from one to the other. But one of them would have to have it. And it gets just harder and harder. Like in the hardest ones for this one, you don't even, usually you start knowing where did everyone start at time 1. In the hardest ones for these ones, you don't know where half the people start in time 1.
Right, you know you get their starting location for 3 of the people, but not the other 3. That sounds next to impossible to me. Now, with that said, if you like deduction games, I think you will like this game. It does ramp up, so I do think it's going to be one of those things where it might, you know, ramp up out of some people's leagues.
Yes.
I can tell you, playing with Emily, you're going to lose. Especially with deduction games. I mean, Emily, you just have like that head for deduction.
Thank you.
We played this, and I was just waiting for her to go, okay, I got it. Because I was like, I'm not sure what I'm getting.
Yeah.
And here's how you're getting the information. This is sort of the easy thing about the game. On your turn, you're going to choose one of the locations. Those are the cards. Now, keep in mind, these are the cards for just this scenario. In fact, even the scenario in and of itself has multiple sets of cards for the different sort of sub-scenarios.
Yes.
But I'm going to take one like the Grand Foyer or Foyer, and then I can take a time.
Yes.
And then I can take that time and place it on the bottom of the card, flip it over, and I'm going to get a couple pieces of information. You're always going to get one piece of information that you share with the table,
yes,
and then one piece of information that is just for you. Because the card, I'm going to flash this for you, looks like this. It's got kind of stuff all over the place. But these tiles have little windows in them so that you can see this. Now, in this case, my private information just has a take another turn icon, which means I share the public information, I put that card back, and then I get to go again. You'll be able to keep going if it keeps
If
telling
it
you
keeps
to take
doing
another
that,
turn.
yes.
But
the reason it would only let you go again, though, is if it's because you are not getting more information than everybody else is.
Yes.
So you looked at time 1, which is probably the information we already all start with,
Right.
which is probably why it told you just go ahead and take another turn, because you didn't learn any more than anybody else. But it is the cool thing about this game is that at everybody's turn, you're getting information, because there's always public information coming out. It's just that the person who's actively taking the turn is getting more specific information. So for example, if he did that at time 1, he would know how many people are in the room. And then usually, so like say he did it for time 2, he would know how many people are in the room, and it'd tell him which one of those people was.
Yeah.
So it might say like, there were 3 people in the room at time 3, and you know, David, that one of those people is A, the adventurer. Whereas the rest of us don't know who the 3 people are unless we like look for the same clue or look for the same thing. And then you also have the other option to say a location, not with the time, but with a specific person. So then you're actually saying like the grand staircase, was the Baroness ever in the grand staircase?
And this is going to tell you how many times, and this is the public information, how many times she was in the grand staircase
throughout the night.
Throughout the night. So of the 6 time periods, she was in there X number of times. I'm not going to ruin the scenario for you. And then it actually, for my private information, tells me the exact time that she was in there.
For one of them, yes.
For
so
one
if she
of them.
was in
So
it
if
like,
she was in there twice.
Yeah, if she was in there like twice, then it could say like time 4 was one of the times that she was in there. And so David would specifically know, okay, I can pinpoint this person to this one piece of information.
And you are tracking that on this sheet. So there's this sheet that has a little map. It has a map repeated 6 times for each of the times, so you can kind of, like, as you determine, oh, they were here, you just write their initial in that room. It also has this center area where you can write down how many times that person was in the room.
Yes.
You might even find out they were never in a room. And there's a lot of, if you like deduction games, you'll get this right away. There's a lot of information you'll get that isn't super straightforward.
Right.
Like any good deduction, if you're at all good at deduction games, you'll recognize you're not just collecting the one bit of information. You're collecting that information, using it with the information you already have, and ruling a bunch of other things out. That definitely happens in this game. In fact, in the first scenario, for us, it happened
right away.
Right in the very first turn. The public information was like, okay, well, we can rule some of these things out really quickly. And that just really kind of gets the ball rolling. We did not try the crazy scenario that she talked about, though. But who is this for and who's it not for? That's one of the things we like to talk about when we do these videos. I mean, let's get the early, easy things out of the way. It's for deduction game fans.
Yes.
It's for Emily.
But I will say who it's for specifically. If you already like deduction games and you're like, is this the deduction game for me?
Good point.
I think what makes it different from others is that you are getting that public information on each turn with the private information. So you can actually say stop at any time, and it doesn't have to be your turn when you figure it out. It could be that like we're playing together, and then on Jeremy's turn, he gets some public information he shares with us, and I say, oh, actually, that's just what I needed to confirm, and now I have the answer. So I'm going to say stop, even though it's not my turn, because I know what the answer is to this specific riddle.
And that is sort of an evolutionary step for deduction games that we haven't just seen in this game, but other games too, where it keeps everyone involved at the table because every turn there's information being added that helps nearly everyone.
Yes.
Like for instance, like Cryptid. Cryptid, you're answering a question, but everyone's at the table and you're all just looking down at the board and seeing all the information all the time.
Which I think also adds a second layer to it, right? It's not just a deduction puzzle, it's also like a what can I ask where I'm gonna get a really big benefit and you're gonna get not as big of a benefit, right? So I'm like not just trying to figure out how do I get the information, but how do I not give you guys the same information that you'll use to get it faster than me.
Yeah, and there's a little bit, not as much, but there's a little bit of that in this as well, because when it's your turn, you might ask the same question that someone else has asked, knowing, well, Jeremy knew this, and now I know this, but 3 or more people don't know this.
And it's the same public information. So
it is the same public, you're not giving out any other information. So there is some craftiness to how you approach this, but it is a deduction game. You're collecting information, and the person who's going to collect that information and connect all the dots is going to be the person who wins.
So who's it not for then? Other than just obviously if you don't like deduction, steer clear, because this is a deduction game.
Yeah, I mean, let's say if you like deduction, I think the person who it's not for is someone, I don't know. I honestly think this is a pretty solid deduction game.
Yeah.
If we're going to sort of rule out people who don't like deduction games, I think this is something worth trying. I do think if you're looking for something that has more mechanical movement in your turns, this is pretty basic.
Yeah,
like,
it's very
you might find it, I don't think too basic, because I think it falls more into the category of elegant than I do too basic.
The puzzle is there, right? Because it has those 6 different times. So it's a little bit like having your brain think about something in a different way than it normally would, where it's like, okay, I know where this person is at this time, but where are they at that time? That puzzle's still there. I would say, though, that it's not for people who want to be able to play this with a group of people who are all at very different skill levels.
Yeah, well, like many deduction games, but this one for sure, it is just a collection of the data with not much else injected into the game. Like, for instance, you could have a game like this that has a wild little deck of cards that you're flipping over an event that kind of messes with information.
Yeah,
that
there's
has.
not any randomness really
There's
happening
no
here.
randomness. You are literally just doing what we described on your turn. Gathering information, sharing public information, next person's turn.
Yes. So if you have somebody who's like kind of getting it, but not super getting it, they're probably not going to have as much fun as the people who are really into deduction and are like 3 turns in and are like, oh, I think I know this, this, this. And the other person's like, what is happening?
That's a good way of putting it, because the fun is from just the deduction.
Yes.
The gameplay itself, the mechanics, the mechanisms, the what you're doing on your turn isn't as fun or as exciting. It's literally just
getting
the
to,
deduction.
yes.
And that could be said probably for a number of deduction games.
It's the best thing about deduction games.
Right, but, and this is maybe not regarded as the best deduction game anymore, but something like Clue, for example, has a lot of deduction, but it also has that crazy chaos of rolling a die and seeing if you can move to where you're trying to move.
So if you hate that about Clue, you'll love this way more.
That is true. I mean, if you are if you're Emily, or in that sort of like category of like, I just love deduction, give me a puzzle to solve.
Clue would have been a good game if it
Without
had just
the
been deduction. Try this. You'll be much happier.
Absolutely. So that is Kronologic. If you have any questions about it, put them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer whatever we can. It is going to be at Gen Con, so go check it out if you can. Like I said, this is the first of a series. I don't know when the other 2 are headed our way, but they're pictured on the back of the box.
They are.
So I think they're fairly dedicated to making
You're not
going to
run out of content. Don't worry.
No, I think, there's what? I mean, 3 scenario boxes and each have
multiple different types you can do.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit here. I think most people, honestly, who get this, they probably might not even get through all of it, except for this one.
I'll let you know. Ask me back in a couple weeks.
Anyway, let us know in the comments below if you have any questions. Until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.